Most guys today are focused on maximizing their workouts, searching for the optimal training program, routine, and exercises to build the most amount of muscle possible. And while there is an abundance of information online, I don't believe it's actually helping guys improve their physiques. And in reality, most people are overlooking one critical question. Why are you not gaining muscle with what you're currently doing? And when we address this question, you'll most likely find it's not about finding that magical formula for building muscle that you might be missing, but actually, it's more about cutting out all the nonsense that's promoted online, focusing on the things that actually work, but more importantly, correcting all the things that you're currently doing wrong. And today, we're going to cover the top 10 reasons that most people aren't building muscle in the gym. And in no particular order, let's jump right into number 1. First, you're stopping your sets way too early. This is by far one of the things that most people in the gym are guilty of. And as a general rule of thumb, muscle is built by taking sets between 0 reps left in the tank or training to failure and leaving 4 reps left in the tank on average. That means if we take our 10 rep max, a weight that we could perform for no more than 10 repetitions, even if our life depended on it, we would have to perform at least 6 repetitions to create a stimulus for muscle growth and up to 10 repetitions to maximize that stimulus. Now, 6 reps with your 10 rep max, that's much different than 10 repetitions, as the level of effort is much lower, and in turn, so is the stimulus for muscle growth. But you can grow from sets performed like this, especially if you're a beginner. But as you progress from beginner to intermediate to advanced, that gap from 4 reps left in the tank to 0, it starts to close. And as you become more advanced, that range from 4 to 0 reps in the tank, it starts to become something more like 2 reps to 0 in the tank. And what you need to be doing is training at the appropriate intensity level based on your level of development. Regardless, most guys that I see training, they're leaving way more reps in the tank than they should be doing. But it's not just the average gym goer that's guilty of this, but even guys that are knowledgeable on the subject. I've even had plenty of clients that I work with directly that I've had to correct. I might advise 3 sets of 12 on, let's say, a hack squat, which happens to be a very uncomfortable movement in terms of muscle fatigue, lactic acid, and even cardiovascular endurance. And when they send over a video of them performing the set, I'll notice that they might actually be stopping 5 or more reps from failure. And they're stopping that set not because they're approaching muscular failure, but rather because the pain level increases with each rep. Number 2, you're not training body parts frequently enough. Now, the bodybuilding community has come back around to higher frequency training in recent years. Things like push-pull legs, trained twice per week, that's become a lot more popular. And I think that the benefits of higher frequency training, they're starting to be recognized. But it's still every day that I get messages from guys who, let's say, train chest on Monday, let it sit there, rest, recover, and even detrain over the course of 7 days. They wait till Monday to roll back around, and then they repeat it again. They also wonder why they're doing this, and they're not seeing great results. But don't get me wrong, body part splits, bro splits, they can work. They can work very well. But if we're talking about having a body part that's just not improving, and you're only training that muscle group once per week, you're missing out on lots of benefits that higher frequency training has to offer. First, by training with a higher frequency, we can most likely increase the training quality. If we're cramming, let's say, 16 sets of chest into one single workout, the exercises that are performed later in that session, they're probably going to be trained with less intensity and lower quality of work. If instead we take half of that workout and we move it from Monday over to Thursday or even Friday, now we can train half of that workout or 8 sets on Monday, take a few days rest, then come back in on Thursday and Friday and finish that workout by performing the last 8 sets. The weights you use in those workouts, the amount of reps that you perform, and the quality of all those sets, they're probably going to be much higher, resulting in much more muscle growth. In addition, splitting this up across the week rather than doing it all in one session will likely leave you much less sore. This is due to the repeated bout effect. It'll also prevent any detraining effect that might occur from taking 7 full days of rest between sessions. And many people will argue that for natural athletes specifically, higher frequency training works because of elevated protein synthesis that lasts up to 48 hours after a session, up to 72 hours max. But in my opinion, even the arguments that I listed previously are even more important than that argument. So don't overlook higher frequency for body parts that are not developing. Number 3, you're picking the wrong exercises. Today, everyone is focusing on what is the most optimal exercise for a muscle group. Everyone wants to find that optimal angle and range of motion on the cable exercise for the lats. And there's nothing wrong with that, as you should learn proper technique when you're training. But the problem with this is most people skip out over the less targeted and isolation exercises, thinking that they're going to build massive physiques, focusing on more refining movements. I don't care how great this new technique biases a targeted muscle group, or what the line of pull or the peak resistance is. If you're 160 pounds, that targeted cable exercise, it's not going to take you to 180, 190, or 200 plus pounds. You're going to get there by eating lots of food and progressing on those big compound lifts. By adding 50 to 100 pounds on your weighted pull-ups, that's going to do much more to your physique development. And it's going to help you add 20 to 30 pounds of muscle tissue to your entire physique, way more than that targeted isolation movement will. Don't get me wrong, all these exercises work and they can and should be used in your training. But if you're only focused on these refining movements, you're going to be spending a long time trying to improve your physique. Each movement is a tool in the toolbox. The big compound movements, those are like your sledgehammer. The refining movements, that's your chisel. That brings me to number 4. You're not eating enough food. For the same reason that big compound lifts are able to develop massive physiques, enough food needs to be consumed to build muscle. And we're not just talking about hitting a gram of protein per pound of body weight. Sometimes we're talking about even more than that. But more importantly, bringing your total calorie intake higher. The calorie intake has to be high enough to push your body weight up. It's a combination of pushing that weight up through diet, but also adding 10, 20, 50, or even 100 pounds to specific compound lifts that's going to transform your physique. What's the fastest way to take a 150-pound guy and build massive quads? Pick a squat variation that he's comfortable progressing on. Feed him enough food that takes his body weight up from 150 pounds to up to 200 pounds. Simultaneously, focus on taking him from a 135-pound squat to a 405-pound squat. And number 5, there's no progression built into your training. Simply put, muscle is built through progressive overload. That doesn't mean that you have to be a powerlifter and focus on improving your 1, 3, or even 5 rep max to build muscle. But it means your training must be progressive in nature. You can add weight to the bar. You can progressively add sets or training volume over a training block. You can progressively increase the intensity of your training by going from 4 reps left in the tank all the way to 0. You can use a combination of many progression methods. The bottom line is, just going to the gym and lifting weights is not going to cut it. You have to provide a greater stimulus than what your body is used to. So even if you found the best exercise, the best sets, reps, volume, etc., but now you're just going through the motions consistently, you're going to stagnate and you're going to need to place progressive overload into your training in order to continue progressing. This is why so many people think that they hit a plateau in the gym. It's not a plateau that you're at. You just don't have any method of progressive overload built into your training. Number 6, you're picking the inappropriate rep range for the exercise you're performing. This is one of my favorite points because it's often so overlooked. Today, everyone hops on the bandwagon by saying you can build a similar amount of muscle from anywhere between 5 repetitions and 30 repetitions. Most people even going as far as claiming that exercise rep range doesn't matter. But this is actually the furthest thing from the truth when we take into consideration the exercise selection. Certain exercises are by far much more beneficial to train in lower repetitions and others in higher repetitions. For example, let's take a highly technical lift, one that's also very cardiovascular demanding. Think of things like deadlifts and barbell squats. There's no way you're going to perform effective muscle building sets as high as 30 repetitions. Show me one successful bodybuilder that's consistently trained with 30 rep sets for squats and deadlifts throughout their career. Once we get up to 15 to 20 repetitions on a set of squats, the target muscle's not even failing. But actually, the cardiovascular system starts to begin to tap out. This will eventually lead to poor form and lower stimulation to the target muscle. Try doing 30 reps on a deadlift. Actually, no, don't do that. The injury risk will be too high for it to be worth it. These bigger, heavier compound lifts, they're much better trained as low as 5 to 6 repetitions, even for muscle building, because each repetition will be much more clean. The load on the bar will also allow the target muscle to be trained near failure. Now, compare that to something like, let's say, a tricep press down. There's really no benefit to training them as low as 5 repetitions, as the load needed will likely lead to bigger, stronger muscles taking over this exercise, resulting in less stimulus to the target muscle. An exercise like this is generally better suited for 10 plus repetitions. And if you personally choose to go as high as 30, there's probably no major downside, but there's also no major advantage. So make sure when you're training a specific lift that you pick the ideal rep range for that movement. Number 7 is a great one to tie back into my previous point, and this one is poor exercise order. Similar to how people will argue that rep range doesn't matter, many people will also argue that exercise order doesn't matter. But the fact is, to get the full benefit out of an exercise, you should strategically place it within your training session. For example, if I feel that skull crushers are my bread and butter tricep exercise, but they also cause some discomfort to my elbows, I basically have 2 options. 1, pull them out of my program and lose all of the benefits that I get from them. Or 2, place them strategically in my workout so that I still get all the benefits from them without all the discomfort. For me personally, that means training the triceps first in the session with something like a cable tricep press down. This gets my elbows super warmed up and my triceps pumped. When I move over to skull crushers next, I have no pain or discomfort in my elbows. And my triceps are already somewhat fatigued. That leaves me to use less weight on the EZ bar skull crusher, which leads to less wear and tear over time. And something that I do with myself and a lot of my clients in certain situations is I place higher risk compound movements, things like squats and deadlifts, after lighter isolation exercises. For example, something that I've been doing for years is placing deadlifts or hip hinge movements after I do hamstring curls. I'll first get my hamstrings super warmed and extremely pumped before moving on to those deadlifts. Now I'll spend less time warming up when I get to that movement. My range of motion and mobility will be much better, and I'll perform like a well-oiled machine. Not only that, but now when performing the exercises in this order, the target muscle potentially gets hit even harder on that big compound lift. If I walk right into the gym and I start performing RDLs, my lower back might be the limiting factor in the lift. But now if I perform hamstring curls first, I'll have a better mind-muscle connection going into the exercise, and my hamstrings will likely be the limiting factor. And number 8, not reaping all the benefits that an exercise has to offer. This one is super important. Certain exercises have unique benefits, and not every exercise should be performed exactly the same. For example, let's say that we're going to perform a full chest workout, and every exercise we do, we're going to perform 2 sets of 4 to 6 repetitions. Certain exercises, you'll notice right away, will be much more beneficial than others. Let's say we started this workout with incline barbell press. 4 to 6 reps, it might feel like a great workout, training the muscle group near failure, all while keeping form and technique solid. That's because it's a big compound lift, and it's great for creating a large stimulus and a large amount of muscle damage. Now, if we get up to, let's say, something like a cable fly during the workout, and again, we have to perform it for 2 sets of 4 to 6 repetitions, you might not feel that muscle working right during this movement. You probably also won't feel much fatigue either. Either way, something feels a bit off. That's because the major benefits of a fly movement is to train the target muscle, the pecs, in the stretched position. Think about how much more the pecs can be stretched in a fly compared to a barbell press. It's no contest. And when you're training a movement like flies, your goal is not to add 100 pounds to that lift over your training career. You should be using that movement to get the greatest stretch of the pecs and a better pump. The focus is not to grow from that movement through progressive load, but rather through stretch-mediated hypertrophy and more metabolic stress placed on the muscle. Therefore, you should train those compound lifts heavy and progressive. But something like a fly, you should be training that focusing on the greatest pump and the greatest stretch of the pecs. That often requires lighter loads and higher repetitions. And you should also insert that movement into your training where appropriate. Generally, that's after you've already warmed up the muscle. And the last 2 points are pretty obvious and go hand in hand. That is, number 9, you're not training consistently enough, and number 10, you're program hopping. Most people might take many of the points I mentioned in this video, apply them for 1 to 2 weeks, then move on to another idea or a new program altogether. Don't be that guy. Muscle is not built from a single workout. Muscle is built from stringing together progressive workouts done over weeks, months, and years. Every productive training session is another step towards your goal. And every week that you either skip training or perform another random workout, or just completely change up what you're doing, you're not taking steps forward. You're taking a step sideways or even steps backwards. The optimal plan, it doesn't exist. But the plan that'll get you the best results is the one that you execute over and over again consistently. And if you want the programs that I personally recommend to build muscle using proven old school bodybuilding methods, all my old school mass gain programs are down below. And as always, if you guys want to see more of the best original bodybuilding content just like this, make sure to hit subscribe.